involve. Going to do something a little bit different this week. Rather than submitting a video for you to look through, we're going to talk through a PowerPoint. So today's topic is film genre. Remembering that this is part of our BTEC National Level 3 Creative Digital Media Production. That's the extended certificates are worth 1 A level, and we're looking at Unit 10 currently, which is called Fictional Film Production. This is Learning Aim A. This is the theoretical aspect of film studies, and then obviously we'll be making a film towards Learning Aim B and C later on in the year. So let's get started. We're going to have a recap of what we looked at last week. So what is mise-en-scène? What are the areas that make up mise-en-scène? And why is mise-en-scène so important in film studies? So I just want you to spend a couple of minutes just jotting that down in your notes. So your questions are, what is mise-en-scène? What are the areas that make up mise-en-scène? And why is mise-en-scène important in film studies? So here's your couple of minutes. I want you to think about how you would answer those 3 questions. So what is mise-en-scène? What are the areas that make up mise-en-scène? There are 6 of them. And why is mise-en-scène so important in film studies? Okay, so you should have written to the answer to the first one, which is what is mise-en-scène, what is placed in the scene, or what we can see in the scene. They're all of the objects, costumes, everything else that make up what we see on screen. Okay, question 2 was, what are the areas that make up mise-en-scène? These are settings, props, hair, costume and makeup, cinematography, the actor, and the editing. And our last one, why is mise-en-scène so important in film studies? Well, it's a great analysis tool. Meanings are created by the visuals that we see, and the audience have a connection with the characters through the use of mise-en-scène. Okay, the other thing it also allows us to do is identify the genre of the film through the objects, the costumes, the setting, the cinematography that is used. So, what is genre? What does it mean? And why is it important to us? So I want you to have a think about what you think the genre means. Yep, it just means the type of film. And the other question is, why is it important? Well, it's important because audiences need to make informed choices when they go to the cinema or they choose to watch a particular movie on a television or on a DVD or Blu-ray. And by understanding what the genre is, they understand what to expect of the film. Okay, so this is just some notes for you. You can jot these down in your notes for your course. So the mise-en-scène of a film helps us determine its genre. Genre is very important to audiences and therefore filmmakers, as it helps us distinguish the types of films that we might like to go to see. Okay, now if an audience likes a particular genre, the filmmaker is going to want to fulfill the needs of that audience. Okay, they're going to want to fulfill those needs because they want that film to make money. They want that film to be successful in the box office and then later in the home. Okay, so ensuring that it follows the right generic conventions will ensure that the audience who like that genre will like that film. Okay, so you can tell the genre of a film by examining the mise-en-scène. Okay, the filmmaker will demonstrate the genre by the use of recurring motifs or cliches. Okay, so for example, a full moon or a graveyard will appear in a horror film, or a galaxy setting in a spacecraft would suggest the science fiction genre. Okay, they're just things that we expect to see when we watch a film of that genre. And actually, the audience is sometimes quite disappointed if it doesn't see those recurring motifs. Okay, so we're going to have a think about what those recurring motifs or codes and conventions would be in the following genres. Okay, so those recurring elements are called codes and conventions, and we expect to see them. So what do we expect to see in a fantasy film? What do we expect to see in a horror film, an action film, a romance, a comedy, or a Western. Okay, so I'd like you to maybe write 5 things in a table like you can see on the screen, just giving a little bit of an example of what we would expect to see within those genres. Okay, I want you to think about identifying the genre in these 2 images. Okay, so we've got image on the left, image on the right. What genre are they? Right. Okay, hopefully you've identified that the image on the left is a Western genre and the image on the right is a horror genre. But why do you think that? Just give yourself a couple of minutes just to note down what about these 2 still images makes us think Western or horror. Okay, so this is what I've written down. Yours might be slightly different, but I've said in a Western you would expect to see a stark landscape that looks like the American Wild West. Deserts, cactuses, the sun is always shining, and those big, wide, establishing shots that show us just how vast the area is. Okay, in a horror film, we expect to see low-key lighting, quite often lit from the back to create shadows. The characters stay hidden. Okay, and that gives us kind of that scary, eerie feel. And the use of black is used a lot in horror films. Okay, so it's not always just about the mise en scène. Okay, the story, or what we know as the narrative, the plot, the character, and the setting all come together to create genre. Okay, so it's not enough just to say this is what the mise en scène is and therefore it's that genre. You need to have an understanding of the characterization and the way that the story and the plot unfolds. Okay. We're going to look a lot more detail at hybrid genre now, and I know it's something that we've touched on in the past. So, a movie is a hybrid genre when instead of focusing exclusively on one genre, it blends 2 or more recognizable genres together. Okay, so an example of this would be the live action remake of Disney's Beauty and the Beast that was released in 2017. It's a musical, it's fantasy, and it's romance. So, I want you to think about how you could identify what conventions from each genre it is by watching the trailer. Okay, and I'm going to have provided this PowerPoint for you to watch that trailer, and there's a tasks that you can put together. So, what is musical? What is fantasy? And what is romance? Just from watching the trailer. Okay, so if you can do that task now, and then we can move on. Okay, hybrids are becoming more and more common as films evolve. Audiences are expecting a lot more. Okay, different narratives, different characterization that surprise them. Producers and directors can only do this by blending genres. Okay, all films will have a dominant genre, but then they'll take elements from a number of different genres. So, for example, Deadpool in 2016. Okay, what is the genre? Well, predominantly it's fantasy, as most superhero films are, but it also has elements of comedy, action, adventure, and romance. So, how can you tell that? Just by looking at this poster. So pause the video now, and I want you to do a poster analysis, working out what areas of this film poster point to those different genres of fantasy, comedy, action, adventure, and romance. So pause the video now and complete that task. Okay, we can also complete the same task for another fantasy film, this time Sleepy Hollow, which was released in 1999. Okay, it is predominantly fantasy, but it also has aspects of horror and mystery. And again, I'd like you to complete the task of how we can tell this film is a hybrid genre just by looking at the poster. So pause this video and do a textual analysis of this poster, pointing at what is fantasy, what is horror, and what is mystery. Okay, now to the next part of the lesson, which are kind of bigger parts of our tasks. So, again, in the PowerPoint that I've shared with you are the trailers for Deadpool and Sleepy Hollow. Okay, I want you to compare these two films. They're from the same fantasy genre. So, what are the similarities? What codes and conventions do they use from the fantasy genre? But what are their differences? What codes and conventions do they take from other genres? What pleasures would the audience gain from these two films? Would the same audience like both films? Why do you think that? Okay, again, let's pause the video. Let's watch those two trailers through a couple of times and then think about those bullet points. What are the similarities? What are the differences? And what are the audience pleasures? Okay, now we've done that task for fantasy, I want you to do the same again, but from your own choice. Okay, so compare two films from the same genre. I want you to choose a different genre from the list below. So, if it's a western, a horror, action, romance, or comedy. And then I want you to choose two films within that genre. Now, they can be two films of your choice. It doesn't matter how old they are. Okay, they need to be predominantly from the same genre. So you have to choose two films from a western, or two films from a horror, two films from action, two films from romance, or two films from comedy. You don't need to do the whole list, just one genre. And then again, I want you to think about those questions that we've just done for fantasy. So, what are the similarities? What codes and conventions do they use from the fantasy genre? What are the differences? What codes and conventions do they take from other genres? What pleasures would the audience gain from these two films? And what would the same audience like? Would the same audience like both of those films? So why not? Okay. So what are the similarities? What codes and conventions do they take from that genre? What are the differences? What codes and conventions do they take from other genres? And what are the pleasures the audience would gain from those two films? Okay. Now again, pause this video and complete that task. Right. So this is the work that needs to be submitted by Monday, the 11th of May. So you need to submit the notes from identifying the conventions from the Beauty and the Beast task. You need to submit your Deadpool poster analysis, your Sleepy Hollow poster analysis, your fantasy film comparison, and the comparison of your choice. Okay, now that work needs to be emailed to me by the 11th of May. Okay, and then we're going to have our audio feedback session like we did last week on the 15th of May, and I will send you a calendar invite for that. So I hope today's lesson has been useful for you. Again, I'm going to send this PowerPoint to you via email, and hopefully you can work your way through without any assistance from me. But if you need any advice, please just drop me an email and I can get back to you as soon as possible. Hope you all have a lovely week. Hope you're all well. Hope your families are well, and we'll speak really soon. Bye.